Hey everybody, this is Evelyn Ray with the ISSA chapter of North Carolina. I just want to thank everybody for joining. We're going to give folks a couple more minutes, like maybe 5 minutes here. So if you need to grab some coffee or get situated, you have a couple more minutes. Mike Curnow will be on in just a minute. Thanks so much for coming. And also, something that we didn't really heavily advertise, but is exciting news, is that everyone is going to be put into a drawing, or at least attendees will be put into a drawing for a $25 Amazon gift card. So we've got about 40 of those to distribute. Those will be given out, I believe, on Friday. After the conference is over. Today's the workshop day, tomorrow's the conference day. So we'll be looking at our attendance and awarding some fun prizes. Hey there, this is Evelyn Ray again with the ISSA Triad chapter of North Carolina, just doing a little check-in. We're waiting a few minutes to give everybody a chance to join. I see a few of you joined after I made the first announcement. We're going to join in a couple minutes, so if you need to grab some coffee or get yourself ready for this call or this workshop, please go ahead and do that. Also, a piece of a fun announcement is that we're going to be doing some drawings for attendees for $25 gift cards for Amazon. So we'll be distributing those on Friday. They'll be electronic gift cards, so you'll receive those electronically. So we'll get started here in just a couple minutes. Thanks so much for holding tight. Hey, Mike, so I think I need you to go ahead and start the broadcast.
Okay, give me just a second here.
Yeah, I actually can't even see it anymore.
Oh, can you hear me on my phone?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yep.
Okay.
I don't know why I can't see the start the broadcast button.
It says it says stop recording to me. Press record, pause recording audio from presenter screen.
Yeah, don't pause it.
Okay. Yeah, not saying I was gonna, however, just letting you know that I saw it.
Okay, so let me just ask, can folks hear us? Type in the chat if you can hear us or just respond. Awesome, that's great. So this is Mike Curnow. Mike, I went ahead and told folks that we'll be doing a $25 Amazon gift card drawing at the end for attendees, which is really exciting. And with that, I will turn it over to you. If you need any help, I'm here to help, okay?
Cool, sounds good. Thank you. Okay, are you able to see my screen, Evelyn?
Yep, I can see your screen. I see you clicking on your presentations.
Perfect. Okay. Alrighty. And
Now I see
this go.
burritos and burgers.
Yeah. This go-to window is gonna bother me here. All right, hide control panel. That works. Okay. Forgot it had that. It's been a while since I've used go-to. Okay, let me enlarge it up here. Okay. So, thanks
So hold
everybody
on.
for.
Oh, okay,
Oh, go
sorry.
ahead.
Somebody was saying they couldn't see your screen, but if you can see it now, give me a thumbs up or a yes. Okay, all right, we're good. Go ahead.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for being so patient. And just want to say thank you for attending this session. Ballin on a budget, SIEMple SecOps. I'm Mike Curnow with Defiant Networks, and let's begin. So the purpose of this presentation, a couple of sections here, just to kind of level set and build some context. Kind of part of the inspiration of why I wanted to do this talk. So due to certain things that happened in 2020, lots of businesses have taken measures to do things like increase their internet exposure, migrating workloads to the cloud, employing work from home strategies, and these are all part of ways to keep certain wings of businesses afloat and alive. So I don't know if I can necessarily label it as unprecedented, but I will say it is kind of crazy, right? Seeing a bunch of migration to these different things. So the problem here, as one can imagine, a lot of these organizations that are taking these steps, venturing out into, to them, what's relatively the unknown, there are lots of downstream implications that we can fill with our imagination, right? So I'd say that it is safe to assume that large amount of these organizations contribute to an overall dip in security posture. So by employing solutions that are going to be easy to spin up, purpose-built, kind of tailored fit, which I know these things together might not sound like they'd work, but later on I'll kind of get into some of it. But we need to come up with these ways to quickly deploy SecOps to fill in these gaps, right? Because this increase in hyperconnectivity, it creates an environment where security has to catch up to things, right? And by security, I'm typically regarding to security operations, like laying out the hold on. Yeah, so we'll get into the NIST CSF in a second here, but basically using the NIST cybersecurity framework is kind of a foundation or a starting point to jump off of and going from there, but don't want to get the cart too ahead of the horse here. The issue here that I kind of wanted to highlight for going forward is that many of the solutions that are proposed now, so like a lot of the MDR and SOC as a service engagements that are prevalent throughout the information ecosystem, are typically predicated upon the assumption that a lot of the clients are going to have pretty deep pockets. And so we need to come up with ways so that we don't gloss over the SMBs and the SMEs, because they also harbor important information. So the solution that I proposed is kind of what's in this presentation. So I have here, I'm not going to tell you what to do, because that's going to look different. That can look like a bunch of things. But I do want to help you kind of piece together your own protocol or your own framework to help better understand how you can deploy SecOps for SMEs, SMBs in kind of a more scalable auto type fashion, I guess. So being able to come up with these solutions that are tight fit to a client without having to account for all this overhead. And kind of the long story short, this is really how to go about creating security operations capabilities that can map to whatever your client's requirements are, and also meet broader SecOps strategy while leveraging open source and working around tons of considerations, things like client concerns and whatever kinds of compliances they have to work around. So there are parts of this presentation I do kind of have to gloss over rather quickly just because some technical mishaps with the provisioning of the original presentation and having to redo certain things. So yeah, who I am, you just do a quick Google, hit me up on LinkedIn. You can kind of see stuff I've done. Before now, I did stuff, and now I do stuff here. Again, let's check out the LinkedIn. Don't want to spend too much time on that. So what's this presentation going to cover? Security Operations Center. What is Security Operations? What's Security Operations Center? What's the structure look like? Kind of a high-level, lightweight mapping of NIST CSF to SOC. Obviously, NIST CSF is the only thing to take into consideration, but I do heavily suggest it as a starting point to help build the more comprehensive and higher-level security mappings that you'll end up doing in the future. SOC maturity, what that looks like, a couple of ways of going about it. Something to kind of keep in the back of your head. Open source, so getting a little bit into the culture and why open source isn't as prevalent as it should be. Not sure if you can tell I'm huge in open source. And then talking about SIEM and security operations with open source software. We'll get into some considerations too. Most of that will be kind of verbal, and then we'll answer any questions from there. All right, so Security Operations Center. What is security operations? We'll get into that first. So security operations are the things that allow you to handle the compulsory kind of all-encompassing things whenever a security event happens. Responding to a cyber security threat. It's definitely how to spell it. So this will look like a lot of different things for different organizations. Whenever you get some kind of risk assessment done, you get a lot better picture of what you need to account for. But really just anything that enables you to prevent, detect, assess, monitor, and respond to a cyber security threat. And so what is Cyber Security Operations Center, or SOC for short? It's a coalescence of procedures, technology, and people that act as a dedicated unit to do security operations on behalf of the respective monitored entity, or ME. And I came up with that term myself. I've been using it for a long time. ME this, ME that. It's not. It's more of a colloquialism than it is part of the lexicon. But I use it quite prolifically, so just kind of a heads up. So the ME could be a client, could be multiple clients if you're doing some kind of co-located deployment schema, or it could be yourself if you're monitoring your own organization and trying to do the detection, monitoring, and responding on behalf of your own organization internally. So much like in SecOps itself, that's going to look different depending on some different things, right? So how the SOC is structured, and that structure is typically determined by the requirements of the ME, coupled with some other considerations like feasible overhead analysis. You know, do I need a physical location? Can our team be remote? Do we need these tools? Can we roll up these capabilities under this other functionality, right? Like you have to just kind of ask yourself some hard questions and just be a little self-aware to try and manage any kind of disparities between client requirements and your own operational capabilities. So SOC organization structure. This is a diagram that you can find floating around, shared on a lot of different articles. Well, a good handful. I was able to find it on like probably 3 or 4 of them while putting this together. This is kind of a high-level overview of what the SOC organizational structure would look like from a kind of personnel and manning standpoint. So you've got this front line of tier 1 analysts that are doing the event triage, responding to alerts, kind of doing doing the boots on ground front work there. And then once things have been validated to a certain extent, they get sent up upstream. So that would hit your tier 2, which would be the incident responder, who would take all the data, leverage all the data that was output from your tier 1 analyst, and then put that to work. And then from there, you'd have this, ideally, you'd have a few SMEs that would be able to be the authoritative source there for what to do next. Then you get the SOC manager, who's got to make sure everything stays together, making sure that the everything is coalescing as it should. Everything is really just making sure you're keeping up with the mission of the SOC, which is, again, going to look a little bit different for what kind of SOC. Is it a web application that's like internationally deployed? Is it industrial control system infrastructure? Could be a number of things, right? I added SOC engineering here because that wasn't, this graph was drafted with more of a event triage analysis perspective, but SOC engineers for a group this size, probably 2 of them should work, right? So SOC engineer is somebody who's making sure that the tools that the organization are using are staying up, and then also they're driving changes of innovation that would be put out by the SOC manager or collectively by the SMEs. Really just the SOC engineer's job is to make sure that if you were to ask me, I'd say that the SOC engineer's highest level, 3 million feet looking down, basically from space, looking down, would be decrease MTTDs and MTTRs. So your average detection and response time should be something that you aim to decrease over time by employing bits and pieces of automation and trying to operationalize any abstraction of complexity where you see it, right? Sounds like a lot of words. Basically just make stuff work, make it work well, trying to innovate based on your own observations and what those around you tell you. And the authorities of, your hierarchical authorities will change based on the type of SOC you're running, what industry it's in, what kind of things you have to be adherent to in regards to standards, regulations, requirements, all that. And then someone like myself, whose experience in SOC has been largely from an architectural standpoint, meaning drafting out what the actual SOC itself will look like. So not just the tooling of everything, but okay, we have this many people. These are the roles we can fill. Here's basically the blueprints of what we're going to do based on the requirements of the client, our own capabilities, whether that be resources, personnel. Notice I didn't say human resources, because humans aren't resources, they're people, and resources are resources. Really just a high-level mapping of what that will all look like, and just making sure that that vision, that design, stays intact, right? And does what they can to help the SOC, help those in the SOC stay true to that vision. Okay, so SOC employment schemes. Not as in personnel employment, but as in how you employ a security operations center. Here are some ways. So from monitoring standpoint, single tenant, which you're really only counting for one ME, and that having a single tenant for one ME is typically dictated by some kind of governance or regulatory requirement that has some kind of agency over how and where the data is stored and located. Usually that is a little bit more money to do, because you're having to stand up an entirely different environment just for them, and the upkeep for that isn't as justifiable as if you were to have a co-located SOC, which can cover multiple MEs, and data structuring and segmentation can be as granular as you want it to be. That's something that I've done personally, but it's not really in this presentation, but I'd be happy to talk about it later on or something. So I always recommend this personally as kind of a default setup, unless the ME does require that you have a single tenant solution, just from a cost and effort justification standpoint. Now, the SOC stand-up structure, that can be, physical location where you're enforcing physical accesses with actual physical security measures like, door lock mechanisms, doormen, laser beams, swinging axes, that kind of thing. And it's based really on just asses and seats, right? You have people there in front of you that you can tap their shoulder and bother at a moment's notice. I'm biased. I've always mainly worked in virtual SOC. So where the team members are accessing tools and all the workloads from a shared remote off-prem source. So like right now where I'm sitting, and the SOCs that I intend to are, more so of a hybrid measure because there are in-people personnel looking at it. But then I'm working on stuff from a remote perspective, right? So that's not too difficult to kind of map out what that would look like. Here's just a couple of ways that could look. Again, I say how it can look. At the bottom, we have a collection of clients or customers or MEs. That could be yourself too. Just keep that in mind. I left it kind of open-ended so you can label that with whatever your imagination desires. On the left, we have a single tenant solution in which you have one SOC for one client, and everybody's either in-house or remote, whatever. On the right side, we have a co-located hybrid SOC, which again is not super all-encompassing, just building the idea that you can have different analysts and SOC personnel working in a hybridized format remotely and in person. And maybe you're running a co-located SOC where you have different clients that have their own indexes that you're doing monitoring on, all that data collection. Just kind of build that imagination. You can build this out as you like here mentally, right? This is the whole idea of this presentation, is to really just kind of spark the process to get you thinking, if anything. Or that, and also a nice way to get you out of work for a little bit. Okay, so moving on to the NIST CSFs and SOC mapping. So there is, right here, we've got identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. I brought up NIST a little earlier as a kind of nice foundation, jumping off point. And I'll kind of dig a tiny bit deeper here. So like for example, identify, detect, and respond are going to be likely what most SOC operations can do. And this is depending on the business relationship and customer, the SLAs in place. Now, I've worked in situations where I used to run the security services wing for an international MSP. So basically it was the MSSP branch of a larger MSP umbrella. And we did monitoring for some already existing customers. And so we were actually able to rope in, protect, and recover into that, because I was able to coordinate with whoever was managing those accounts to do the remote access and remediation necessary. So it was a full front to back engagement. But again, that's going to depend on the level of services that you can provide capability wise and what the customer would need. So like there might be some requirements that say, you can't be doing this remote control stuff on my system, right? Which is fine. There is no one-size-fits-all solution, but if just kind of like a rule of thumb that I like to keep in the back of my head is that when designing a SOC, it's best to do what you can to cover as many capabilities as you can, even if you're not going to necessarily do it, just so that you have those pathways in place in case you need to start reaching back there and going, oh, well, for protection, we can do this, just in case a client asks it. Because it's not necessarily good form if someone asks if you can do something and you're not sure. What's even worse is that if a client asks you if you can do something and you say yes without knowing it, you should never do that. I know that's like an opinion thing, but I'm going to say it anyways. You should never do that. Sorry, give me just 1 second here. So, doing a little bit more of a mapping to capabilities. Identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. For identify, SIEM would be an option because you're able to enumerate assets based on artifacts of the data that you're taking in, right? Security risk analysis, that's something you do typically more on the front end. So it's an actual engagement where somebody comes in, or even yourself, depending on whether it's an official risk assessment or just more of an internally driven measure. But it's better to have third party, or at least just someone on the outside, who can really take an objective look at your system or your organization or whatever that target environment would look like. Then you have protect, which is obviously stuff like your malware scanning protection, your access controls to the environment. If it's a physical environment, do you have security guards with lightsabers blocking the doors to your server rooms? Is there some kind of access controls, like, biometrics or something? Well, whatever that may be. I'm kind of pulling off the top of my head here. Your data loss prevention strategy is very important. Just preparing for the fact that one day a horrible act of nature might occur and everything gets, sucked up into a tornado. Do you have that stuff backed up somewhere else? Detection, and that's detection is pretty widely used a lot, right? So event log monitoring, so being able to see events as they happen. NIDS and HIDS, so your network and host intrusion detection systems. I left the P out for protection, but that's something that has to be, that's a whole different conversation of whether or not you should employ that, because that's more part of response. Hunting, actually actively going into kind of doing a more preemptive or targeted look to see if you can actually find, track down indicators of compromise, find pieces of these attack chains, piece them together, go, oh crap, that's actually an attack on us. Kind of a simplified way of putting it, but then OSINT, which OSINT isn't a direct detection method, but OSINT, this wide public domain of public knowledge, known IOCs and all that, that helps you build detection capability and strategies. For example, IDS rules and IPS rules from Proofpoint would be an example. Just Google Proofpoint IDS rules or captures. And then respond. Responding would be the taking response on the actual entity itself. And that can be through an endpoint detection response solution, or that can be through something like OSEC HIDS that has active response capabilities that are basically just scripted functions that your OSEC agents, OSEC, by the way, is a host intrusion detection system, so does things like file integrity management, does anomalous activity alerting and stuff like that. So it's really host oriented. Again, all these examples are included but not limited to. I just didn't want to spend a lot of time mapping out every single thing here when you can just Google alternative to whatever. Then recover, so and actually enacting the DLP strategies that you put in place in your protect phase, or your protect realm there, and then just doing the remediation. So whatever havoc the vulnerability or the threat that the vulnerability allowed, all the havoc that wrought, just going through and putting out the fires and figuring out the best ways to do so. Ideally, there'd already be playbooks in place of pre-mapped and written procedures that you would do to do that. Next, we're just going to be taking a look into some SOC maturity measuring here. There's a couple of models. The first off that I want to talk about. All right, I should take a step back. There are two widely used models that I know of that are used. One is the CMMI, or the Capability Maturity Model Integration, that came out of CMU, or Carnegie Mellon University. And it's typically required by a lot of government contracts for software projects. And it's a pretty all-encompassing model, because it's not just software, but it's also like management and other peripheral areas. So across the product division, entire organization, and it maps different areas with a tiered maturity level system. So it's pretty typical in measuring maturity and other standards too. Like another one that I know utilizes a similar thing is a supply chain security standard from UK, or from the EU, called TSACS, which is a supply chain organizational security. And part of that assessment is measuring the maturity of your measures in place. But yeah, so a lot of us should probably know this already. If not, give it a Google. It's pretty easy to ingest, I think. Second off is one that my preference leans towards too. This is the SOC CMM, or the SOC Capability Maturity Model. It's a capability maturity model that measures your capabilities, measures your capability and your maturity off of a whole host of different dimensions that you would find in a SOC. So it's tuned specifically for security operations centers. So you don't have these weird gaps or thought or knowledge disparities between holes you might come up with while doing a CMMI appraisal, is what they call it. And it really takes into account the fact that a SOC doesn't look any one way. It just doesn't. It's gonna look different either way. I guess I have to free up storage space. I had technical issues running this GoTo, so I had to install GoTo on my little Lenovo ThinkPad, which has like 10 gigs of hard disk space. Fix that out. All right, so here is just the model of what that can look like. So this is the SOC CMM model here. It covers the domains of business, people, process, technology, and services, and all the aspects below. We typically just cover, in this presentation, we're not covering businesses or services. We're really just kind of looking more so into the people, processes, and technology. But yeah, this is something to Google. Just go to soc-cmm.com. I believe it's .com. If not, it might be .org. I'd give it a Google. Definitely something to, put on the wall. So you can always look at it, I think. All right, so moving on. Making open source work for you. There are certain things to traverse and consider when delving into considering utilizing open source for your security operations. So one thing that I have to talk about before we move any forward anymore is the culture of commercial versus open source. this typically becomes kind of a psychological blocker for a lot of people. And well, for one, it's heavily commoditized. So a lot of organizations and I try not to vendor or organization bash. That's not the point. If anything, I'd like to just help everyone become a little bit more reachable by people that might not be able to afford the top tier chromatic aesthetic blinky beepy things, right? You can fill in your imagination with whatever names you will, right? So typically, security is commoditized with cost-intensive line items, right? So, like, if you want security monitoring, okay, here's licensing fees for this. Oh, that's going to cost you this, and it's kind of also kind of like a piecemeal way of going about it, because there are no real all-comprehensive solutions, because that would be a silver bullet. There's no such thing as a silver bullet. Yeah, ivory tower mindset. This whole, if it doesn't cost a gajillion dollars, then it's worth nothing, right? That's a hard thing to get over. It's a very low resolution model of thinking about it, because at the end of the day, as security professionals, we should be looking at, I guess if I were to personally have a goal in my career, it would be get everything to such an easy point to where I basically don't have a job anymore. Not that I don't like my career, but at the same time, it really is about trying to come up with some of the most rapid ways and scalable ways of being able to deploy stuff. And a lot of this is kind of, introspective analysis of your organization, right? Like, what can you do to provide better sources at a cheaper price or become a bit more reachable, right? You don't want to completely miss target markets if you can, or completely miss certain demographics if you can, industry-wise. But again, as I said in the beginning, I'm not going to try and tell you what to do. I just want to give you some stuff to think about. It's heavily marketized, right? So a lot of commercial interests control the content marketing space, or their their presence is prolific in the security content space, right? Which typically serves to drive down open source as a kind of good, but never as good as our insert whatever silver bullet security product name here alternative. That inherently makes commercial seem more palatable, which in some cases it is, and that's totally fine. And so reliance on that marketing to kind of stay alive and afloat is something that I see a lot, because open source is catching up, and not just in different piecemeal solutions here and there, but comprehensive things working in concert to fill out the role of SIEM and SecOps platforms. Open source painted as good marketing only solution. There's another kind of weird underhanded tactic. I say it's not weird. I actually say it's pretty effective. Some organizations will offer open source solutions as a way for you to kind of, try out something, and then that's essentially a sales funnel to get you to on board with an actual premium product. But nowadays, I find a lot more open source tools and projects that are just that. They're flat open source. They exist for the good of the security industry, or they are just tools that aren't necessarily security tools, but you can leverage them in a way to expand your capabilities that you wouldn't really have thought of before if you just live in this vacuum of security specific tools, right? So that's that. So basically, that point is just saying open source is typically marketed as this way to funnel people into a premium product, where there's kind of this other grayer area that's not considered, but open source is there as a flat solution for some tools. So, and then lack of competent security operations engineers, and that's not a specific dig at anybody. It's just in my own experience, I've felt that in certain areas, I felt that I was the most technical. If I was junior to someone senior to me, which I don't really know if that should be the case, but pretty much saying that there needs to be a little bit more technical competence seen on the SecOps engineering side, meaning I'm gonna say something, right? So like if you're an AWS security engineer, you're a really good AWS security engineer. That's awesome because you can employ all these different things. You can do vulnerability management in AWS systems. You can employ CloudSplate, Scout Suite. You know how to leverage things like Kinesis data streams and get all this stuff set up so that other tools can talk with it. That's awesome. But outside of that, do you carry the same principles with you if you were to move to Azure or Google or even a bare metal environment? Would you be able to apply the same processes, or are you in the vacuum of that specific environment you're in? So it's really just the ability to venture out, observe things on the periphery, and take in bits and pieces of what you can that make sense. And yeah, that's it for that point. Next, limitations. I kept the same pictures in here, totally on purpose. Purported open source limitations. So one is as an organization grows, open source SIEM software. Okay, so first off, I've read through a lot of comparison articles where bigger name companies will purport these same exact points here. Just saying, hey, it's good, but it's not as good. As organization grows, open source SIEM software can become labor intensive. I could say the same exact thing for commercial solutions. I've spent a number of years working in some commercial solutions that when it comes time to scale, it's like, man, we're paying how much for this? I'd say that's false because if we're going to speak in the parlance of open source big data solutions, I would tout Elasticsearch as a great flexible and scalable way of doing it, because as your data needs increase, bam, I can spin up a container with a new Elasticsearch node, and I can join that node to an already existing cluster, and then I can shard all that stuff out how I need to, and I can use Curator to manage the flow of that data, the data retention policies, and where that goes, whether it's Hadoop or S3 or something like that. Yeah, I'd say that's false. This is going to kind of appeal to more of the low tech but high decision making type folks. They read this and they go, oh, yep, okay, cool. Organizations save money on licensing costs but spend money on continual maintenance. I would say false for that. Not entirely. That is rooted in some truth. It really comes down to how well you can manage it, right? And which means you need to be able to take certain measures to observe things like, disk space, and are we maxing out our CPU all of a sudden? We got a bunch of logs coming in, stuff like that. So false, not entirely. It's rooted in truth, but I still say false for that. Many open source SIEM solutions lack key SIEM capabilities such as reporting, event correlation, remote management of log collectors. Okay, go to google.com, search up Graylog. It's a completely open source log event management platform built on Java. It has all this and more. So it's hard for me to take someone seriously when that comes up as a point. And then there's also other measures you can do to do this, like Elasticsearch has plugins like Elastalert, and it has reporting mechanisms from the new Canvas boards and dashboards. There's a lot of ways to get into it to actually do that. Organizations may have to combine open source SIEM with other tools. That happens in commercial as well. Integrations between remote SOAR platforms, or combining it, opening yourself up to ingest from your OSINT streams, anything like that, right? They're combining tools regardless. But that's just kind of muddying the waters, so to speak. Open source SIEM requires a high level of expertise to deploy effectively. I would say that's 50-50. I'd say half the time that's right, half the time that's not. The biggest measure or the most coherent measure or pseudo KPI I can think of for this is how well things work in concert out of the box. So some solutions come bare. You have to set everything up and connect everything together. Some solutions are already built so that all the components talk together out of the box, and you don't really have to do anything like that. So that's 50-50, right? And if you do the risk reward analysis on that, that's that'll be your responsibility. Open source SIEMs typically don't provide or manage storage, a sensitive issue. I say false for that because they may not provide storage out of the box, but that storage can be done on-prem on the same server. That storage can be sent out to a Hadoop or S3 server or whatever kind of backups you need. That's kind of a non-issue. A lot of these points, I bring this up because maybe some of the people watching this might have just kind of got their interest piqued and like, oh, open source. Okay, yeah. Well, they're probably not going to talk about this. I obviously tend to be pretty high biased in favor of open source because in my time working in commercial, a lot of open source stuff is leveraged anyways. It's just the implementations are proprietary, right? So saying that they don't provide or manage storage, these are all ways to kind of trap you into a vacuous narrative. So I just kind of want to help overcome that hump, so to speak. And it is Wednesday, so I guess it's hump day. All right, so enough of that here. I think I drove my point home, and then beat it to death, and then kept beating it. So, all right. So next off, we'll be looking into just building out some capabilities of NGCM and open source. I say NGCM, next generation SIEM. That term's a little nebulous. It's used a lot. I've seen a few different articles and publications use the term interchangeably, kind of co-opting different attributes and capabilities. But ideally, if you were to just look at it from a very high level, it's just going above and beyond the call of just, collecting, alerting, reporting, dashboards. It's more so this idea of making everything easy and employing measures of automation where you can fit it in. Basically, doing what you can to make everyone on the SOC's job easier. That's the idea of the NGCM. So we'll talk a little bit about SIEM. So the tenets of it: collect any data type, dashboard creation, reporting, alerting, highly flexible and scalable data ingest management, the ability to be able to take in any kind of data, whether structured, unstructured, be able to accommodate for an influx or decrease in data, typically scaling up and down depending on the bandwidth and throughput needs. And then SOAR, effectively just codifying workloads and playbooks. So in your incident response and triage processes, they're going to be smaller or more complex processes that are iterative and repetitive, that are done a lot. So being able to automate some of those are good. And being able to execute on command certain things, right? So if a whole slew of people need to be alerted for something, you can map out a request using your that's hooked into your SMTP server that can mass email the specific people that are needed based on that alert, right? Like that's another measure of it. And some automation, how the workloads are executed. So like, for example, if your log event management tool detects something, a notable event, which is the typically used parlance, right? So it's an event that comes in that could trigger an alert that just kind of needs eyes on. That could automatically trigger a couple of data enrichment capabilities in SOAR, right? So like not just your geolocation enrichment, stuff like that, and vulnerability database lookups, but more so like maybe automatically employing a UEBA solution, right? Maybe you have a couple of events in a row that are the same user, but two totally different IP addresses. So you might have SOAR enact a tenant of UBA for user anomalies. So like looking to see the deploying haversign algorithms, right? So that's a big one that I like because it just measures the distance between two places and then sees if you can get there within a reasonable amount of time and speed, which is typically no. So you get some funny results when you use that. Then SERP, which is just having a kind of like a ticketing system in an extent. It's more so just being able to annotate and collaborate on security incidents that happened. They also serve as historic record that you can go up and look through past artifacts, and that can kind of help you with your own internal threat intel efforts. And then UEBA, user environment behavior analysis. So I remember it was just UBA at one point, which is user behavior analysis, and that's just making sure that the user's doing things that user typically does, and if they do anything that's kind of outside of this semblance of a normal baseline for them, it's like, oh, hey, did you log in from here? That was you. Okay, good. Then you have the environment stuff, right, which is just extending that same model out to account for the environment that's being monitored. And that can look like a few different things. Measuring anomalous events in users and environments is obviously par for the course there, but then having a layer of intelligence over all that collected data so that, you might have some kind of ML or machine learning functionality on the side that's used to that data. And another thing to be careful with throwing machine learning at stuff. It's not going to work as well as you think because of the diversity in data sets. But if you want to learn a little bit more on that, the newest Elasticsearch 7.8 comes out with a machine learning capability in there, which is really just kind of this abstracted out view on how to look at your data, but it's still pretty cool. And so with all these listed out here, we'll start by going into a few open source SIEMs that are out there. So the first one we'll talk about is Seamonster. Seamonster, it's an open source SIEM they all exist in a Docker cluster, Docker clusters that are spread out between a few VMs or bare metal devices. It's a pretty comprehensive solution. Comes out of the box. It's heavily tested. You do some tuning, provision your data sets, and then you get data in. That's one way of looking at it. Now, when you're looking at stuff like down here at the bottom left, you see like log queue processing and all that, and you see all these different tools that are used. A lot of open source tools like RabbitMQ and OpenVAS or whatever, those might already be part of commercial solutions, but you just don't know it because it has a different aesthetic presentation, right? So just keep that in mind as well. Typically, the non-technical folk might look at this and go, that's a lot of stuff to have to account for. But a lot of it's not different from what you're already working with already. It's just you're not looking under the hood, and that's fine. That's totally fine. But yeah, so they just came out with a new version recently. I suggest checking that out. That's pretty cool, Seamonster.com. They're doing good things over there. Next is one that I'm very proud of. That's the Defiant SIEM. And Defiant is an open source, it's an open source Docker stack built with all these different containerized tools that work in concert with one another to be quote unquote SIEM. So all these tools individually are not SIEM, they're just pieces of a whole. So that's an open source solution that we at Defiant Networks built mainly as a way of showcasing how our management implementation of overlay networks using the host identity protocol can fit into the realm of security operations. Because typically you can send data upstream from distributed sensors over something like SSL or VPN. But we kind of went the extra mile and went past a good enough solution and came up with a more secure way of doing it. I've got presentations on YouTube talking about the host identity protocol and our management implementation of it. Just YouTube, Mike Curnow or Defiant Networks, and you should find one of those. I don't have links in here, unfortunately, but I'd be happy to provide anything after this. So it's kind of it's a similar idea. It's a big Docker stack that it's all configured beforehand to recognize and work with each other. So the setup is minimal. The effort comes into the tuning, right? Which is like with any tool that you set up. And it also comes with the Elasticsearch management tool curator so that you can go ahead and offload flows to Hadoop, S3, whatever you want. And you can employ these kinds of solutions with many open source tools, really. It's just making sure that you have the capabilities there. So, for example, if you have an open source tool that doesn't come with some kind of data curation stuff out of the box, that's something you can kind of start researching how to do. And it might not always work, but for this, it comes with it. So all you got to do is do the repositories and go from there. And then next is another personal favorite of mine. Oh, that's just how the UI looks. Next is a personal favorite of mine, Security Onion. Now, a lot of people can make the argument that Security Onion is not a SIEM. I'm not going to argue with you. I don't think it's a SIEM, but I think it is a huge, huge way to bolster comprehensive network data generation in a monitored environment, right? So as someone who's deployed Security Onion as a part of SOC, as another data source that feeds into the SOC, it's a huge help. So it's an open source network security monitoring OS, and so it leverages HIDs, NIDs, DNS lookups, all that stuff, and it has pre-made Cabana apps that present the curated data in a coherent and relevant format, so that basically you can use it to kind of threat hunt to your heart's extent as far as networking and host traffic analysis is concerned. All right, so I've only got a few examples for SIEM. Next, we'll just kind of look at SOAR. So SOAR is a personal favorite of mine because I like automating where I can, while also being aware that certain things cannot or shouldn't be automated or should be hybrid automated, right? So there was an open source comprehensive platform that was a really good solution that was free, and now it's commercialized, so you have to pay licenses to use. And it's coupled with another commercial SIEM. I didn't like that idea because I didn't want to have to pay money. So what I did was I went out and tried to find other open source SOAR platforms. Mind you, this was like really early this year. I had a hard time finding a good open source solution out there. And so I just said, you know what, the heck with it. I'm going to take a step back, adjust the search queries instead of security orchestration automated response. Let's just see if I can find workflow automators. And so I found Apache Airflow. Apache Airflow is really cool because you're literally doing the same thing. You're automating workflows in Python. It is a bit more code intensive. So if you have some light Python programming, that's awesome. And it is API accessible. So you can establish a sense of awareness and automation from your log event management tools. And then next, there's Shuffler, which is a pretty new one. This was not out at the time that I was trying to research open source solutions, but it did come out recently. It's a light SOAR option. I say light because it comes with a handful of integrations. You still kind of have to make your own. But it does come with this, like once you make them, it's all drag and drop from there. So that's another solution to entertain. And then next, we can take a look at SIRP, or the incident response platforms. It's just these tools where you're noting security incidents and collaborating with other analysts and stakeholders to see, like, what the heck's going on. So first off, there's FIR, or FIR, stands for Fast Incident Response tool. It's a Django-based platform, very lightweight. It's kind of, I say bare bones, but not in a bad way. It's just lightweight, right? So it allows you to create new events, assign attributes to them. And then the Hive is the same functionality, but it has a semblance of awareness and automation built in, whereas FIR, to my knowledge, is a little bit more siloed. So it would take a little bit more TLC to enact that sense of awareness and automation. Awareness, the ability to be able to communicate it with from something else, and then automation is obviously automating. So that's one. And then UEBA, that can look like a few things. One example I came up with was the machine learning and Elasticsearch. Really, UEBAs can be tuned to your environment. So like if your environment doesn't have users, then you wouldn't really worry about Habersign, or actually, Habersign comes in handy a lot when you have remote workers coming in through like VPN or something, because if you're monitoring on those VPN connections and requests, and you realize that, hey, this guy just came in VPN through somewhere else, it's kind of a weird issue, and kind of a personal, a bit of a analogous tangent here. I had worked for an organization that when we're doing monitoring for an EDR, EHR, not EDR, EHR, EMR platform, electronic medical records platform, and we were able to create a very lightweight Habersign little bolted-on app that would query the database on command to pick two different logins and say, oh, we're basically trying to figure out improper account usage, and we figured out that like hundreds of people were using similar accounts. So it was basically this whole shared account thing, where that was actually a violation of the end user license agreements, right? So again, a little tiny rabbit hole, just wanted to bring that up. And that would be dependent on the organization, what that looks like. I think UABA should be purpose-built. One thing you see a lot of is machine learning just getting thrown at everything, which is a hard thing to do. It's nice and flashy, and it looks aesthetically pleasing from a high level, but from someone who's spent a lot of time on the back end, I can tell you personally and straight up, that's not it's not a very good solution for everything. And that really just comes down to data type structures and tuning, right? So I think it can work in a lot of places, but to the level that it's reported to, still needs some work. Okay, and then so next, I do have some considerations to keep in mind. And these considerations, they're going to look a little bit bare, unfortunately, which is my fault. I had an issue with the original presentation. So employing security operations strategies typically shouldn't they really shouldn't cost more than what it'd take you to recover from an incident or a breach. That's just kind of a measure to keep in the back of your head when trying to justify and price out what you can and can't do versus your capabilities. Another thing is OSINT and threat intel are not mutually inclusive to one another. However, they're also not mutually inclusive, right? I bring up threat intel because it's going to help you build out some detection and internal threat intel capabilities, right? So OSINT would typically be your public domain items that everyone knows, and then your threat intel is more contextual to the organization. Like your OSINT would be like, Alien Vault OTX is a great example, where people from all over publish their known IOCs or indicators of compromise. And there's even ways to feed that into Suricata using Python modules that take those hashes and apply them to custom rules. And you have threat intel, which is more contextual to your organization. So threat intel would be something like, hey, we realized that someone had kind of co-opted our domain, like if I'm Acme Corp, they've co-opted Acme Corp S or some other kind of spelling of it. So the idea being that somebody somewhere out there wants to impersonate you for whatever reason, right? So threat intel things are more contextual to the organization itself. And that can leverage OSINT, right? That can leverage some OSINT too, just kind of for some comparative and diff analysis. And then your threat intel can also, threat intel can also feed some OSINT streams, right? Like if you're doing threat intel and you actually come across some kind of IOC that would be beneficial to show the world, then yeah, you definitely post it up on OSINT streams. Let's see what else here. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, so that is it for the presentation. Kind of a bit of an abruptness there, but yeah, I have, I think, 18, 17 minutes here. Would anybody have any questions? I'm sure there were. I wanted to put frequently asked question list in here to kind of help out, but time-wise, it just didn't work out. Yeah, so open to questions if anybody has them. Questions. Not sure if there's a special. Okay, questions here. Let me. Okay, we'd love to see a quick demo of some of the open source tools. Okay, that. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, there's a question here. Love to see. Okay, we'd love to see some quick demo of some of the open source tools. I mean, that's something that can be arranged. This particular presentation wasn't geared towards that. It was more just trying to make you aware of what's out there so that you can make some decisions yourself, However, if you wanted some kind of demonstrations or something, I wouldn't mind hashing that out. Just email me at the mike.curnow@defiantnetworks.com, and we can work something out. And you can also look me up on LinkedIn too, Mike Curnow. It's a picture of me holding a baby goat with a hat. Let's see. Any other questions? Okay, cool. So it was helpful, but I don't have the open source background to deploy. That's cool, because I think a lot of us get to that point, get to that stance at some point, right? Because there was a point in time where all this stuff was laid out in front of me, and it's just this very huge, almost overwhelming in a sense, But this might sound weird, but I think that's actually kind of a good place to be, because it allows you to be a bit open to what's out there. So is there, I guess if you don't have any current background foundation to draw from, you might run into some kind of operational disparities there, which is fine. Just something I have to traverse. So that's kind of I see that as a bit of a deeper conversation, which I'd also be happy to help you map out, or at least like shoot the breeze with on LinkedIn or something. Okay. I saw there was a hand up. I don't know what that let's see. Evelyn, if you're still on, I'm not sure if there's something I'm missing. Oh, here we go. There's another one question.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, just
sorry. Yeah,
Jason responded. Yep.
Yeah, for sorry. I just for the record of what's going on, the go-to thing is really compressing my screen, so I'm trying to navigate this, and it's kind of funky from
and
my
I'm
end.
actually trying to access your session from my other computer's mouse, so I'm not
Okay.
I'm not helping at all over here. But yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
All right. Nice. Okay, so there's another one here. I would have to lean on other people on the team to deploy, simply because in my role, rolling out the tools myself would take me away from other things I have to focus on. Okay. So, yeah, I guess that becomes kind of more of a organization and delegation conversation, right? Because that's simply mapping out, do you have the capabilities to do so? Would you need to bring on talent to employ that? Would you hire third party on just like a single project basis to at least stand the thing up? Would you have your people undergo training? That's another thing. Like, there's a few things to take into consideration, but I totally understand having that. Your plate's already full enough, and it's hard to deploy certain things, because even just the simple tooling around of it is taking you away from the things that your actual role requires. That's a bit of a toughie, because it's very relatable. A lot of us have ran into that in some point or another. Yeah, that's understandable. I mean, I guess if you're saying you'd have to rely on other people, I think that you've already taken into account that it might not necessarily be in your purview to do so, which is a good first step. I guess next step would be mapping out the capabilities and length of effort it would take for the other people that you would rope in to deploy that. And if they don't have that, but you really want to exercise open source, because you think it'll be a benefit, then I think it would be a good idea to reach out to bring on someone to do it on a project basis, or bring on someone internally to lead that effort. It just depends on a few things. It depends on really just trying to see the end goal, what that might look like, and what would be the best way to get there. And if you don't have the resources in-house, then you might have to look outside. But it's not, I mean, I wouldn't despair about that. I think it seems like you've started giving a lot of thought to this already. Let's see here. Okay, there are some other questions here which I don't believe are directed towards me. Things about conference-centric stuff like Discord channels and B-sides trainings.
Yep.
I think that might be for you, Evelyn.
Yep. I already answered. So basically, Yeah, we didn't have much time to actually switch over to a virtual conference. So, um, yeah, a Discord would be great. We even talked about it for like a split second, but then, all the things that had to happen for this conference kind of there was no way. But next year, if we're virtual, we can certainly do that. Or, for upcoming workshops, it's a great idea. I'm glad to hear your interest in it too, Jason.
Cool. All right. Well, if there's no more questions right now for me, I guess I'll go ahead and uh, cut off here. But yeah, anyone reach out to me. I try and be pretty accessible for if people have questions and stuff. So yeah, feel free to reach out. If there's anything that I missed, that's fine too. I fully realize that there might have been not a complete 100% coverage on some stuff, and that's totally fine. So yeah, that's really it. I'm open to conversation. If you guys have any comments, questions, concerns, just hit me up, mike.curnow@defiantnetworks.com, or to look me up on LinkedIn, Mike Curnow. I'm here in Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill area, so I think if you're looking location based, you should see that. But yeah, cool. All right. Do I just stop? How do I stop broadcasting?
You can just click on file and end the webinar. Thank you so much, Mike. That was really awesome. And, lots of points in there for me as well. I need to get it back into Security Onion and keep playing around, keep myself on top of things, keep myself fresh.
Yeah,
Thanks so
hey,
much.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, I'm hope that it sparks similar thought in everyone who watches this. So cool. All right. Well, hey, thank you everyone for your time. My apologies being a couple minutes late, but I'm glad that there is value here. So all right, have a good one, everyone. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.